Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind can find a reason why something won't work? You think about money, and almost immediately a familiar thought appears. There's not enough. I can't afford that. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose what I already have? What if things never change? Maybe you've noticed that these thoughts can appear before you've even had a chance to consider another possibility. And that's what makes scarcity so powerful. It doesn't always feel like a belief. Sometimes it simply feels like reality. But what if the way you think about limitation is something you can gradually change? What if scarcity is not the only lens your mind can use to interpret your financial life? This doesn't mean pretending that problems don't exist. It doesn't mean ignoring bills, responsibilities, or difficult circumstances. And it certainly doesn't mean convincing yourself that money will magically appear. Instead, this is about something much more practical. It's about learning to notice the moment your mind closes a door and gently asking whether another door might exist. Most people don't realize how often their attention is shaped by expectation. If you expect difficulty, your mind tends to search for evidence of difficulty. If you expect rejection, you may notice rejection faster than opportunity. If you expect that money is always hard to keep, every unexpected expense can reinforce that story. Your brain is constantly filtering information, and habits of attention can become surprisingly strong. Think about the last time you were worried about money. Perhaps you looked at your bank account and immediately felt tension. Maybe you started calculating everything you couldn't buy. Maybe you remembered a previous financial mistake. Maybe you began thinking about what could go wrong next. Notice what happened. The situation may have been one event, but your attention turned that event into a much larger story. That's where possibility can begin. Not by denying the original situation, but by creating enough space to see more than one interpretation. Suppose an unexpected expense appears. The scarcity response might sound like this. This is terrible. I never have enough. There's always something going wrong. The possibility response doesn't have to sound positive or unrealistic. It could simply be, this is an expense I need to handle. What options do I have? That's a very small change. But notice what happened. The first thought closes the conversation. The second opens it. And when the mind begins asking better questions, attention changes. You start looking for information you might have ignored before. You may notice an option for reducing another expense. You may remember a skill you could use. You may think of someone you could contact. You may recognize an opportunity that was already there, but wasn't visible while your attention was focused entirely on the problem. This is one reason possibility is closely connected to attention. What you repeatedly notice becomes easier to notice again. Over time, repeated patterns of attention can become habits, and habits influence decisions. This is where the subconscious becomes important. Your subconscious mind isn't a magical machine that creates everything you think about, but your repeated thoughts, emotional reactions, and behavioral patterns can influence what feels familiar and automatic. If scarcity has been familiar for years, possibility may initially feel uncomfortable. You might even reject it. You might think, that's not realistic. And sometimes that reaction is understandable. If you've spent a long time protecting yourself from financial disappointment, your mind may believe that expecting less is safer. Scarcity can become a form of emotional protection. If you don't expect much, you can't be as disappointed. If you never consider new possibilities, you don't have to risk being wrong. If you always assume that money will be difficult, then difficulty becomes familiar. But familiar does not always mean useful. This is where a different practice begins. Instead of forcing yourself to believe that everything will work out, start training your mind to look for options. Not guarantees. Options. There's a major difference. You don't have to say, everything is going to be abundant. You can say, there may be another option I haven't noticed yet. That statement is much easier for the mind to accept. And because it is believable, you can actually practice it. Maybe you've noticed how different questions produce different emotional responses. What if I can't do this? Creates tension. What could I try next? Creates movement. What if I never have enough? Creates fear. What is one way I could improve my situation? Creates direction. The external situation may not have changed yet, but your relationship with the situation has changed, and that matters. Because when your emotional state changes, your ability to think clearly can change with it. When you're overwhelmed, your attention becomes narrow. You may focus only on immediate threats. When you become calmer, you can often see more choices. This is why replacing scarcity with possibility is not about repeating positive words while ignoring reality. It's about creating enough mental space to respond rather than react. And this can become a daily practice. For the next 24 hours, notice one moment when your mind uses scarcity language. Maybe you hear yourself say, "I can't afford it." Don't argue with the thought. Don't force yourself to say, "I can afford anything." Instead, pause. Take one slow breath and ask yourself, what else could be possible here? That's it. You don't need to find the answer immediately. You are simply teaching your attention to remain open for a few more seconds. Maybe the answer is an alternative. Maybe it's waiting. Maybe it's learning something new. Maybe it's reducing another expense. Maybe it's asking for help. Maybe it's finding a different source of income. Maybe the answer is simply recognizing that you don't know yet. Even that can be useful. Because "I don't know yet" is very different from "there is no way." One closes the future. The other leaves room for it. And if you repeat this practice consistently, something interesting may happen. You may begin catching scarcity thoughts earlier. You may notice the emotional reaction before it becomes a full story. You may become more aware of the assumptions you've carried for years. And little by little, your mind may become more comfortable considering alternatives. This is where neuroplasticity gives us a useful way to think about change. The brain adapts through repeated experience. Patterns that are practiced repeatedly can become more familiar. That doesn't mean one exercise will completely change your financial mindset. It means repetition matters. The goal is not to eliminate every scarcity thought. That's unrealistic. The goal is to stop treating every scarcity thought as a command. A thought can appear without controlling your next decision. You can notice it. You can breathe. You can question it. And you can choose what deserves your attention next. This is also where the language of manifestation can become useful without treating it as a guarantee. Many people who practice manifestation describe this shift as moving from a scarcity frequency toward a possibility-oriented mindset. Whether you think of that as changing your vibration, changing your attention, or simply changing your habits of thought, the practical exercise remains similar. You begin noticing what you normally overlook. And when your attention changes, your choices can change. Your choices influence your actions. Your actions create experiences. And those experiences can gradually give your mind new evidence about what is possible. Think about how powerful that can become over time. You don't need to become a completely different person overnight. You simply need to create one different response. One moment. One question. One decision. Then another. Maybe you've been waiting to feel financially confident before taking action. But confidence often develops after repeated experiences of responding effectively. You don't have to feel certain. You can practice becoming curious. Curiosity is powerful because it doesn't demand certainty. It simply asks, what else is here? And that question can become a bridge between scarcity and possibility. So tonight, give yourself 2 or 3 quiet minutes. Think of one area of your financial life where you often feel limited. Don't try to fix it. Don't judge yourself. Just notice the first thought that appears. Then take a slow breath and ask, what else could be possible? Stay with the question for a few moments. Let your mind search without pressure. You may not receive a dramatic answer. That's completely fine. The purpose is not to create an instant breakthrough. The purpose is to practice leaving the door open. Tomorrow, notice whether you catch yourself using the old scarcity response again. When you do, return to the same question. What else could be possible? Day after day, little by little, you are practicing a different relationship with uncertainty. You are teaching yourself that a problem can be real without being the end of the story. A limitation can exist without defining every option. And a difficult financial moment does not necessarily tell you what the future will look like. Possibility begins in that small space between what happens and how you respond. Protect that space. Practice it. And let your attention become a little more flexible each day. If this practice gave you something to think about, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with the possibility you want to become more aware of this week. Then come back tomorrow and continue the journey with us. You can also find additional resources in the description and in the pinned comment. Remember, consistency usually matters more than doing one powerful exercise once. A few intentional minutes each day can help you become more aware of the thoughts, habits, and choices shaping your relationship with money. I'll see you in the next video.